This is the third video about Sukkah Daf Beis Amid Aleph, and we had learned through the Mishnah and also the beginning part of the Gemara, and we had gotten up to Snei Takanta, and now we're up to Mina Hani Milei. From where do we know these words? Min on. From where do we know these words? So there's three Amoraim, and each give a different derivation of these words. Which words? That Sukkah shehi gavolim alam yasrim amma psula, that the Sukkah can't be taller than 20 amos. So you have three Amoraim. One is Rabba. Here's Rabba. And then one is Rabbi Zera. See? Rabbi Zera. And then finally we're going to have Rava. And these are not early Amoraim, and it's a little bit strange because usually when you have derivations from Psukim, especially if there's going to be some kind of nafkamina, so the ones who typically darshan Psukim will be the Tanaim, and then you'll see their disputes in Mishnayos, and then what the Amoraim typically do is they analyze those Mishnayos and they derive things from the Mishnah. And then you'll have the Gaonim and Rishonim interpreting Gemaras, and then you'll have the Achronim, typically, the key word is typically, not always, but typically Achronim will interpret the words of the Rishonim. And so here to have Amoraim darshaning Psukim is a little interesting, to say the least. So I seem to recall in some instances when you see Amoraim darshaning Psukim, maybe it's just an asmachta. So that doesn't mean that that's the case here. It seems like they're finding the derivation for this biblical law, and there do seem to possibly be nafkaminas between them. But it's something to keep in mind. Okay, so let's look at the first one from Rabba, and this one is one that I happen to feel is the most compelling. All of them are very compelling explanations, but Rabba, his explanation is compelling because of the line you can draw between Sukkah and Mavui. Because we see Sukkah shigavolim al me'as from Psula Rabbi Machshir, and you have a similar dispute, same line, same mandamers that are involved, right? You have the Tanakam and you have Rabbi Yehuda by Mavli, and the Mavli, the Lachin Lakor is there for Hakera, and so it's something that you can see. So it does seem like it fits nicely with Rabba's explanation. Let's see what Rabba's explanation is. Amar Rabba Damar Kra. So he darshans it from this pasuk. Where is this pasuk? It's in Vayikra Chaf Gimel, pasuk Mem Gimel, and often you'll see in the margin some kind of explanation, like right over here. They'll tell you where to look. Here we have Torah Hashalem that gives you the full pasuk, but really it's a good idea when you see the Gemara cite a pasuk, look it up in Makros Gedalos. Or it's good to get some sense as to the context. So here we have some of the psukim, and it might be actually a better idea to look it up. Look it up and see actually the earlier pasuk. So we'll start from Membeis. Why? First of all, context. Secondly, Membeis is cited as a proof text by another Amora. So let's just start here. Basukos teishvu shivas yamim. You shall dwell in Sukkos for 7 days. Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael. All that are homeborn in Yisrael, yeshvu basukos, should dwell in the Sukkos. Why? Leman yedu daraseichem, so that your generation will know. Ki vasukos hashafti es b'nei Yisrael. That I set the Bnei Yisrael in Sukkos. I caused them to dwell in those Sukkos. So this pasuk Mem Gimel is Rabba's proof text, and here is a little bit of my own insight into what exactly is going on with this pasuk. First, let's see Rabba's words inside. So, if we look, oops, 1 second. Let's go look again at what Rabba says. So Amar Rabba da Amar Kral man yedu dorosechem ki basukkah soshavti es bnei Yisrael. That's part of the pasuk. So then we continue. Ad esrim amma, until 20 amos, Adam yodea shudar basukkah. He knows he's dwelling in the sukkah. L'malam esrim amma ein Adam yodea shudar basukkah mishum delo shalta ba'ena, because his eyes don't reach. It's not like the eyes have dominion over that specific area. So the typical explanation that I've heard of what it means Laman Yedu, so it's focusing on the word Yedu, knowledge, and so your generation should know. And what are those generations? Those are us. And if you can see the Succah, so then you know you're sitting in a sukkah. So then your generations are knowing. And if you can't see the Succah, then your generations are not knowing. And you can see Rashi over here, Laman Yedu, and so that's a pretty standard explanation of it. But I think there's actually something more interesting going on here. If you look at the word dorosechem, the Gemara cites it with malei vav, but if you look at it inside, it actually doesn't have the vav there. You see over here, Leman Yedu dorosechem is spelled chaser. So it's very easy to run an al tikra. Don't read it, right? Al tikra is this, al this. How are you going to revocalize it? What new nikud will you put? I think that Rava is actually saying al tikre dorosechem ela dirosechem. Their dwellings. L'man yedu dirosechem. They should know their dwellings. So look at what happens. He says ad esrim amma, until 20 amas adam yodea. That's a citation for the pasuk. Adam yodea shu dar basukkah. Why does it say dar? Because dorosechem is certainly some sort of resonance, as an echo here from the pasuk. So until 20 amos, the person knows that he's dar basukkah. But l'malam yasrim amma ein adam yodea shedar basukkah. Now, why is this the case that he doesn't know that he's dar basukkah? Mishum delo shalta ba'ena. Because his eyes don't reach so that he wouldn't know. He doesn't see the Succah, and the sukkah is defined by the Succah, as we'll see from another proof text. So that would be an interesting drasha that Rabba is giving. Just another interesting thing about this citation is that it's a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic. So Amar Rabba de Amar Kra. So there's a dalid here. That's Aramaic. The Amar Kra he's citing the pasuk. Then Leman Yedir Sechem Kibasukah Shafti Es Bnei Yisrael. That's obviously Hebrew. It's biblical Hebrew because he's citing the pasuk. But then it continues. Ad Esrim Ama Adam Yodea. You can tell by the vav here that Yodea is Hebrew. She. If you see a shin instead of a dalid, meaning the word that, so that should be clear that it's Hebrew. So it doesn't say Adam Yada did dar b'sukkah, but it says Adam Yodea shehu dar b'sukkah. L'mala me'asrim ama ein Adam Yodea shedar b'sukkah. So all of this is in Hebrew. Most of it's in Hebrew. But then all of a sudden, mishum de la. So it's a dalid. You could tell that it's Aramaic. And then shalta, you could see the kamatz aleph ending over here is Aramaic, and Eina is also Aramaic. So it's a little bit strange to switch from one language to the other in the middle of a speech from a named Amora. When I see something like this, I have my usual explanation of it is that the first part of it is what the Amora actually said, and the second part of it, is an addition by the Stamma de Gemara, this anonymous narrative voice of the Gemara, writing in Aramaic so you could tell that this is an insertion explaining what the Amora means. So that's a possibility, and it doesn't mean that the Stamma de Gemara is wrong, but it's still it's good to be aware who says what. So that's a plausible option. Another possibility in this particular case is that the reason for the Hebrew is that he's focusing on the details of the drash. So since he's restating the pasuk, which is in biblical Hebrew, so he's using Hebrew, right? Adam Yodea Shehu Dar. He wants to echo the Hebrew, and then once he's done with the details of the drash, then he's explaining how that applies mishum de lo shalta ba'ina. So anyway, that's Rabba's explanation. Rabba was the Rebbe of Abaye and Rava. So we'll see that Abaye is going to interject and is going to argue with two other Amoraim that give alternate explanations. So he's defending his Rebbe. Okay, so Rabba, again, just now that we've seen that it has to do with the eyes extending up and whether he could see the schach, so I think first of all it's a drasha from the pasuk, Laman Yedu Dorasechem, either just the Yediyah or also Yedu plus revocalization of Dorasechem. And furthermore, it's possible that he was looking at the parallel between Sukkah and Mavui and trying to see what could be motivating this argument between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda, and so then if they share this common cause, it makes sense that they would both it would follow the same line. So anyway, that was Rabba. So now the next suggestion is by Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera Amar Mehacha. So he cites a pasuk in Yeshaya. The Sukkah tiyeh litzel yomam mechorev, and so on and so forth. I've heard many people parse this as the Sukkah tiyeh litzel yomam mechorev. That's one of the reasons why it's good to see the pasuk inside. It's from Yeshaya, and let's try to get a sense of what the pshat is in the pasuk before we go further. This might actually help answering a Tosfos on the daf, but we'll consider that Tosfos maybe later. So, just 1 second. I'm going to load up the pasuk. Okay, so here's the pasuk in Yeshaya. Yeshaya Perek Daled pasuk Vav, and again, it pays to know the context. So it's talking about in the future what will happen. Uvara Hashem al kol mechon har Tzion v'al mikraeha anan yomam. He's going to make an anan during the day. V'ashan v'nogaish l'hava layla. And so a cloud and smoke by day and a shining of flaming fire by night. Ki al kavod chuppah. For over all of the glory shall be a canopy. And then it continues with Sukkah tiyeh. And the question is this Sukkah the same as the chuppah? If you look in Rashi on the pasuk, in other words, not Rashi in the Gemara, but Rashi on the pasuk, so he cites this idea that there's 7 different things that Hashem is providing, and so you have Anan and Ashan and Nogai, Shlava, and Sukkah, and Machzeh, and Mistor. So each of these seven different things. I think I'm working from memory here. But if you look here, let's load it up. And so, so 7 chupot are mentioned here: cloud, smoke, splendor, fire, flame, shelter, shechina. And he explains how each of these things, each of these terms applies, and what exactly it means. And it could be metaphorical, allegorical, or it's protecting from regular rain, regular stream of so a stream is a stream of fire from the river of fire of the wicked in Gehenna, and the rain is the rain that falls on the wicked. So it pays to understand pshat in these psukim according to Rashi. But then, according to Rashi, it turns out that chuppah and sukkah are different things. If you look in Radak, so Radak says the osa chuppah shehaya lahem l'tzel yomam mechorev, etc. So that is it seems like he's saying it's the same one. That chuppah is going to be the sukkah for Tzal Yom HaMechorev, and it's going to be L'Machzal L'Mistor. So it's different ways of parsing it, and maybe that could answer certain questions that come up. But it's a good idea to know. Okay, so let's go back over here to the pasuk, and there's a makef here between Sel and Yomam. So it's Litzel Yomam, which I would read as a day shade. So the Sukkah Tehiyah, I would translate. There's different ways of parsing, different ways of translating, but I would translate it as this chuppah shall be the Sukkah Tehiyah. It shall be a sukkah. L'tzel Yomam as a day shade mechorev, from the heat. And that same chuppah shall be u'lemachzel mistor, as a refuge and for a covert, mizerem matar, from storm and from rain. And so you don't have to say that the sukkah is also going to provide protection from zerem and from matar. We're saying that this chuppah is going to be a sukkah for the purpose of day shade from the heat. Okay, so now back to the Gemara. Go back to the Gemara. Here we go. Just pause for a second. No, we're good. Okay, so so he cites this pasuk: the Sukkah Tiel Tzel Yomam Mechorev. Either and this chuppah will be a sukkah for a day shade from the heat, or you could say the Sukkah Tiel and it will be a sukkah for Tzel Yomam Mechorev. But regardless, he then darshans ad esrim amma adam yoshev b'tzel sukkah, for up to 20 amos. So a person is sitting in the shade of the sukkah. So, and I guess that based on this pasuk, one way of reading this is that based on this pasuk, you're requiring that it be providing shade. A pasuk in Navi telling you a halacha that it should be for shade, and so that's a requirement of sukkah, that the sukkah itself, which is the schach, needs to be providing shade. So adam yoshev b'tzel sukkah l'mal me'asrim amma ein adam yoshev b'tzel sukkah el b'tzel defanas. He's sitting instead in the shade of the walls and not from the schach. Okay. Another way of understanding this is that we have the word sukkah. We don't know what sukkah means, and so we're not learning divrei Torah, divrei Kabbalah. We're not learning halacha from what's found in Navi, but we're understanding what the what the word means. And the way you would figure out the meaning of the word is take a concordance. You look at every single time that the word sukkah appears, and that gives you a sense as to its meaning. So a sukkah is something that provides shade, and since a sukkah provides shade, so now your sukkah, your schach, is not providing shade. He's sitting instead in the shade of the defanos. So this is Rabbi Zera's explanation. So Amrle Abaye, who's Rabba's student, says to Rabbi Zera, he challenges him, Elameata ha'osa sukkaso b'ashtros karnayim. If you make your sukkah in ashtros karnayim, you look at Rashi, he says that there's shnei harim gedolim v'ashvelu beinehem. So it's basically in the valley between two mountains, and so all of the shade comes from those mountains. So hachinami do have a sukkah. You're going to say this is not a sukkah because it's not coming from the schach; it's coming from the walls. So Amrulay, he said to him that hasam dalastros kernayim iketzel sukkah. Over there, if you would remove the mountains, so there would be shade. Hacha dal defanos leketzel sukkah. But here you remove the walls and there's no tzel sukkah. There's no tzel from the sukkah, which again it seems like they're defining as schach. It's interesting if you sit in a sukkah nowadays and you see the way that the sun is shining. Are you actually sitting in the shade from the schach, or is the shade coming from the walls? And just notice it, and it's a good question, and there are presumably answers, but it's something to think about. Okay, so he basically establishes the requirement as he establishes requirements for a 20 amos sukkah or less, a 20 amos or less sukkah, on the basis of that derivation. You might say that with this, Rabbi Zera is rejecting repercussions of the specific drasha. There's basically two ways of thinking about this. It's either they're trying to derive one law. In other words, they're trying to derive the law that sukkah shekivol amal miyasrim amma is psula. And there might be other repercussions. And so you could say that by putting forth this requirement that there needs to be a sukkah, the word sukkah means something that provides shade from the schach, so that gives you that law of 20 amos. And so anything that's a sukkah doesn't really matter the location. We're just trying to teach this law about 20 amos. So you take away ashtros karnayim, that sukkah itself will provide the shade. Or you could say that there actually are nafkaminas, and that they're not the nafkaminas that they're considering, and so there will be repercussions. My sense of this, and feel free to disagree, but from the fact that Abaye is asking this question, it seems he's trying to shlug up Rabbi Zera. He's not just asking, will you now say this halacha? But he's trying to give, he's trying to disprove it. Because obviously, if you build an ashtros karnayim, you think you're not going to be able to have a sukkah. That's impossible. And so I would read that possibly as not having, there not being practical significance to these drashos. But on the other hand, I could argue forcefully the other way as well. So I'm not going to come to a conclusion. I'm not going to continue talking about this now. Let's go to the next proof of Rava. So Rava Amar Mehacha. from the previous pasuk in Vayikra, Basukkah Teishu Shivas Yamim. So that you should dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. Amar Torah Kol Shivas Hayamim Seimi Diras Keva V'Shev B'Diras Arai. Go out of a permanent dwelling and instead dwell in a temporary dwelling. Sa'ad Asrim Amma Adam Osa Diras Arai. Lamal Mi Asrim Amma Ein Adam Osa Diras Arai El Diras Keva. More than 20 amos, you're going to make it into a permanent dwelling. So again, Abaye is going to try to defend his Rabbi, and he's going to try to attack. Rava, and he says, "Elamiata asam mechitza shel barzel v'sikech al gaba and hachinami de lo have sukkah." So maybe you could say hachinami that yes, but no, this is obviously something that's not true. So proof by contradiction, and so. Amar Lei, Rava responded to him, Hachi Kamina, this is what I would say to you. Until 20 amos, that a person would make his dwelling place a diras arai, ki avid lei diras keva nami nafik. When he makes it a diras keva, so it also is good. L'mala mechaf ama, the adam also diras keva, but bigger than 20 amos, so somebody is almost going to be forced to be making it into a diras keva, and this is of the style of a diras keva. Ki avidli diras arai nami lo nafik. Even if he makes it a diras arai, it's still he wouldn't be fulfilling. And I would also read this as a rejection of there being practical nafkaminas. In other words, what Rava is saying here is that the end goal is to get to this law, that a sukkah which is Gavol Mal Me'asrim Amma is Psula. And there's different ways of encoding that instruction, and the fact that it's something that is only Shivas Yamim you're sitting, right? So you're only Basukkahs Teishvu Shivas Yamim. So Basukkahs Teishvu Shivas Yamim. So that shows what sort of dwelling place it's supposed to be. But it's not that we're trying to teach there is a biblical requirement that it needs to be a diras arai as opposed to a diras keva. Rather, there was this halacha, maybe the reason is that it's supposed to be, the whole purpose of it is it's supposed to be arai. So you would make something into something that's under 20 amos. But we're not trying to get this as a biblical requirement that it needs to be something that is arai as opposed to keva. And if so, it might not be a good idea to try to draw practical differences between these three derivations. It could be that these three Amoram never intended that there would be practical differences, and they're just trying to find some biblical basis for this halacha, of the Tanna Kamma. Okay, so that brings us to the end of Amid Aleph, at least within the text of the Gemara itself, and we'll see what the next section is.